Good morning, everyone. Today, Mello and I are going to be talking about the evolutionary psychology of Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law basically says that anything that can go wrong will probably go wrong, and then we're going to talk about how evolutionary psychology might be playing a role behind why this law exists. So let's go on to talk a little bit about evolutionary psychology. So, as we all know, evolutionary psychology is a theoretical approach in the field of psychology that says that probably all mental and psychological traits that we have, like memory, perception, and language, are a result of certain evolutionary processes. So it says that human behaviors and most human behaviors and cognitive functions are adaptations that are shaped by the process of natural selection and process of natural selection to solve certain problems that kept coming up in the environment that beings were in. So the field of evolutionary psychology sort of integrates principles from evolutionary biology, anthropology, cognitive psychology, and neuroscience to understand how our evolutionary past influences present behavior and mental processes. So that's we all know a little bit about evolutionary psychology already, but just so we could rehash it. And let's talk about what's Murphy's law. So, like stated before, it says that anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and it is often used to convey a sense of inevitability about the potential of errors, missteps, or negative outcomes in any given situation, especially when things are not meticulously planned. The origin of Murphy's law is generally attributed to Edward A. Murphy Jr., who was an American aerospace engineer who reportedly coined the phrase in his practice as an aerospace engineer in the late 1940s. So that's pretty much it about Murphy's Law. Let's try and understand now why we as human beings perceive and remember negative events a lot more, which is basically, the basis of when Murphy's Law comes from. So, firstly, there's an evolutionary bias for negativity, evolutionary basis for negativity bias. Negativity bias is basically us focusing and remembering negative events and experiences a lot more than positive ones. So it basically serves a survival. Uh, there's a survival mechanism that is in the works there. So that firstly, there are ancient threats. Early humans faced many dangers, and remembering the negative events were a lot more crucial for their survival than remembering the positive ones. Then it serves an adaptive function. Being more attuned to potential threats increases their chances of survival and reproduction. Then the evolutionary psychology of risk management, it served as an adaptation strategy. Focusing on the negative a lot more was an adaptation strategy to survive in the environment that we were in. So it served as a precautionary principle, right? Better to be safe than sorry. And it also helped in risk aversion, so minimizing potential harm and increasing chances of survival, right? So now I'm going to hand it over to Mello to talk a little bit more about the psychological implications of the Murphy's Law. Over to you, Mello.
Yes, thank you, Shruti. Could I please have the first point here? Right, so when it comes to psychological implications, I'm specifically talking about how Murphy's Law can affect someone who is already prone to anxiety or prone to worrying a lot about the future. So, first of all, Murphy's Law could reinforce that pattern of negative thinking, and it can lead them to anticipate that worst case scenario and keep worrying and increase the stress about potential negative outcomes. Next point. And this reinforcement could be further strengthened if they experience the confirmation bias. So, if they selectively remember all the times that things have gone wrong in their life when they hear about the Murphy's Law, then that could further reinforce their pessimistic beliefs and make them more concerned about the future. Next point. And as this happens, it can lead to increased vigilance in an anxious person. So the individual could be on a constant lookout for all the things that could go wrong. And this heightened state of alertness can be mentally and physically exhausting, which again contributes to their overall anxiety levels. Next page. So then this belief, like if it is something that the individual believes in and it's strengthened, it will have an impact on their decision making. Because if an individual believes that things will inevitably go wrong, then they might become overly cautious or indecisive. And the fear that any choice would lead to a negative outcome can paralyze their decision making process. Next point. And the thought that things will go wrong no matter what they do can worsen the feelings of helplessness and lack of control, which is often associated with anxiety, and that again could exacerbate their experience of anxiety and stress. Next point. And lastly, this fear of everything will go wrong in the future, anyways, or that there is going to be some negative outcome, anyways, could lead to maladaptive coping mechanisms. As the individual seeks to regain a sense of control over the future, they may adopt avoidance behaviors in order to try preventing those negative outcomes. But such avoidance behaviors only provide short term relief, and they will just increase anxiety in the long run, as we know. So, right, so when we talk about Murphy's Law, we need to keep that perspective in mind, that when dealing with anxiety, there can be a lot of these challenging negative thought patterns, and developing a more balanced and realistic perspective of it is what can help a person learn how to cope effectively. So, a healthy perspective on Murphy's Law acknowledges that the future is unpredictable and mistakes are bound to happen, without being overly negative or pessimistic about it. So, on one hand, we can prepare and plan for the future as much as we can, but we can also adapt and be flexible in the face of uncertainty. So, accepting that uncertainty, learning from mistakes, and building resilience is the more realistic and healthier perspective of Murphy's Law. So, that was it for our presentation. So, we just have a few questions for you. First of all, which bias tends to reinforce the belief in Murphy's Law? Option A is anchoring bias. Option B is hindsight bias. Option C, confirmation bias. And option D, attribution bias. Thank you so much for participating. Yes, it is option C, confirmation bias. Next is the question, what is Murphy's Law? First, option A, anything that can go wrong will at the worst possible moment. Or option B, never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. Option C, anything that can go right will go right. And as most of you have said, option D is correct. Anything that will go wrong anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Okay. Thank you so much for participating, and we're open to questions.